millions of vulnerable Americans struggle to get reliable transportation to their medical appointments. That's why I started MedHall. Citi launched the Impact Fund to invest in both women and entrepreneurs of color like me so I can realize my vision and give everything I've got to my company and my community.
I got you.
For the love of people, for the love of community, for the love of progress. Citi.
Welcome to PaleyFest New York. I'm Elaine Low, Senior Entertainment Business Reporter for Insider, and I'm delighted to host this special conversation honoring Netflix's hit series, You, Season 3 of which premieres on October 15th. Thanks to PaleyFest's official card and sponsor, Citi, for helping to make this event possible. Today, we're thrilled to have members of the series' gifted cast and creative team here. Joining us are Penn Badgley, who plays Joe Goldberg, Victoria Pedretti, who plays Love Quinn-Goldberg, and of course, executive producer, showrunner, and writer Sera Gamble. Welcome to our special guests, as well as everyone watching at home. And don't forget to subscribe to Paley Center's YouTube channel at the link below. All right, so let's jump in. In season 3, Joe and Love are now married and have a baby, and they've moved to this affluent suburb in Northern California, which is a real send-up of Silicon Valley tech types with the influencers and the biohackers and the private schools. And, you know, Sera, we've seen Joe in a different city every season, first in New York and then in LA, and now in suburbia, where he's still grappling with the same murderous and stalkery impulses that he has. But the structure is also quite different, right? Like, without giving away any spoilers, you know, instead of sort of there being one sole focus of his obsession for the duration of the season, it's not quite that simple. You know, how did you envision the storyline for this season, and what were some important elements for you?
Well, we have to keep evolving. I mean, that's part of the job if you're lucky enough to have a show that goes a few seasons. I mean, he has a wife and a baby, and then all of the hobbies he had before they got together. So he's definitely juggling more.
And Penn and Victoria, how did it feel to be back shooting the series together? And were you all filming during the pandemic? And what was that like?
During a surge in LA. Yeah, I mean, the pandemic part, I think in some ways it felt on set. I think maybe it's hard to remember at this point. It largely felt, I think, the same. I don't know how much it inevitably affected the work a lot, but I think we've all been in this so long, it's really hard to remember how different things felt. So maybe that's a question I can answer better in retrospect a year from now. But how it felt for us getting back to it, I mean, it was a joy, partly. I mean, the Joe Love dynamic is one, like what you were saying before. I think with Love there, the structure does actually become more different from season 1, because so much of the load lands on Victoria. And I'm really not saying this. I think she has the harder job. I think yeah. So for me, it was partly a joy, and playing Joe was always tough. So, you know, it was partly tough. I don't know about you, Victoria.
I do not think I have the harder job. But yeah, you know, I can't speak for the rest of the cast and crew, but personally, I think it was kind of, it was definitely a joy to get back to it and these characters and their dynamic, especially knowing that we were playing more from, you know, the true, I don't know, it's hard to say true, but more within how we saw the relationship developing towards the end of the last season, which was really exciting and something to look forward to. I think it was frustrating to not be able to see the bottom half of a lot of people's faces that I was working with. Yeah. You know, so much of the joy of this work is that I work in a collaborative space, you know, like we make art. I guess I could, you know, just sculpt alone in my house, but I've chosen to do something that I get to work with other people and develop relationships. And it's harder to develop relationships when you can't appreciate the full, I don't know, even subtleties of the way in which we communicate and get to know each other. And I got that a little bit more with the other actors because we were maskless around each other more. But yeah, I mean, it was a huge difference. I appreciated a little bit more like forced alone time. I'm a big fan of that. So that was somewhat good. I learned that I like need that more in my work, just like taking a step away to focus. But yeah, very different, but also just always an incredible opportunity to be working as an actor. Yeah.
Where were you all physically filming this time around? Mostly in
Burbank. And then on location around LA and in these places that look like Northern California more, like in Griffith Park and stuff like that.
We had a plan to go to Northern California and shoot a bunch of exterior scenes there so that it could feel really authentic. You could really feel like you were in a new city. And then COVID struck, and that was one of the hardest things. Was just, we had to admit to ourselves that we had to stay where we could control things better, and we didn't want to travel people up north. So we worked very hard to make certain parts of Burbank feel a little bit more like Northern California. I researched trees more than I've ever researched trees this season.
To get the Northern California foliage just right.
I think it was convincing. I think, you know, I mean, like, there are certain locale, well, I don't want to offend Northern Californians. I was going to say, like, you know what? I'm just, hot take right now. Southern California can feel like Northern California with a little bit of movie magic.
We just rationed the palm trees.
Yeah.
And it was Silver Tree, our producing director, grew up in Northern California. So she was very strict about the total number of pools that could be in people's backyards, because we're in all of these really fancy houses in the neighborhood, but it's not as much of a thing up there. But down here, you can't buy a house without a pool. So this might be very boring for people to listen to, but that was sort of the production thing of it all was, can we subtract the swimming pool so we can shoot here?
I feel like we're always required to adapt in so many different kinds of ways in this work because there's so many factors that we can't control. And that is part of the thrill in it, I think, because the final product is a product of, you know, these kinds of like weird uncontrollables that create, you know, the final product. I've said product 3 times.
That's what we're doing.
Well, you could have had me fooled. I thought you guys were up in Northern California. Although, you know, Sera, to your point, I wonder if this is sort of like the TV production version of like that SNL sketch with the Californians where they're all just talking about the freeways that they're taking.
I mean, even just saying every season we want to give you a new location and a new, you know, cute meditation on love, lowercase, uppercase each season. But we knew that to people who don't live in California, like people have an opinion of us just being in California and the rest of America and the world. Like there is a sort of blanket, oh, they're in California. But for those of us who live here and have lived here for a long time, they're like completely different worlds. So part of the job was to help express like, here's what's different. Here's why Love, for example, was like the queen bee in LA, but she's kind of a fish out of water, just moving a few hundred miles north.
Yeah. And, you know, Penn and Victoria, I want to ask you about that. How did you approach your characters for this season? You know, Joe starts out feeling kind of trapped in married life, and Love is still, you know, mourning her brother. And they're both trying to figure out this new parenthood thing and this relationship between the two of them that's really past the honeymoon phase. And, you know, I mean, also past some bloodshed in season 2.
Okay, so I'm really trying to like dial back in time to, because this is like a year ago now. And in COVID terms, that's like, you know, 3 years. And in a newborn, I have like a 1-year-old now. So that's like a lifetime.
So your brain is mush right now.
Yeah. Can I remember yesterday? What did I do this morning? Well, okay. What I was saying earlier about Victoria having the harder job, maybe that's, you know, whether or not we could talk about that later. But I think Joe with Love is in a way, I think it's like it's easier to take on because there's something happening that like maybe it's always forcing, it's always testing this device. And Sera maybe can speak to this a bit, like Love's significance as a figure kind of creates a creative tension with this central device of Joe's thoughts. You know, I as a character as an actor, I don't speak so much more often than you would think watching the show. Like you watch the show, you hear my voice a lot, you see a lot happening. I on set sometimes will have a really unusual amount of silent work to do. And when Joe is not with Love, that's very, that can become ever more the case. When he's with Love, he's sort of forced out of his bubble. And, I think particularly in the first like 2-3 episodes, this device of being in couples therapy and them needing to like, do the same thing that all couples do, but with the body count. It was actually really, really engaging. And I think some of my favorite stuff of probably the whole show has been in that therapist's office. I don't know that I can say more than that.
That was like our first few days of shooting.
Yeah, first few days.
It all went downhill.
That was a huge conversation, actually. I mean, so our writer's room opened in February of 2020 in a totally different world. And so we were figuring it out. We had the season mapped out. Then this happened. We all went home. And I spent a few months of my life just talking with our production team about how the hell do we even approach shooting a show like this? Like, we don't have a show if people are not physically intimate. So there was a huge series of conversations with Penn and Victoria and the other actors about their comfort level with like a bunch of different stuff. And so one of the conversations we had was about like, how do we start this so Penn and Victoria can start working together again? Because the season, I mean, if you've seen it or when you see it, if there's no connection between the two of them, if they're not working well together, there's no season. I mean, so we really had to start with that. So we basically shot all the therapy scenes for the whole season in the first week, because we were like, this is just going to be two people on a couch. Sometimes they're a little mad at each other, so they're not even sitting very close together. This will be a good way to start.
Yeah, the couples therapy component of it, again, without, no spoilers, is really interesting because, we obviously get a lot of internal monologue from Joe, and now we get a lot of it from Love as well. And getting to see this also external third person, parse out their relationship tics. I to take a step back, I will say, like, given Joe's actions in the first 2 seasons, I thought that maybe by this season that would have dampened some of the enthusiasm for this character, who has a lot of, as you know, thirsty fans online. But I think the thing that surprised me watching this season, especially as a parent of 2 young kids myself, is how relatable a lot of Joe and Love's new parent struggles are, minus the body count. But of wanting to like protect your child and sort of recalibrate your identity after becoming a parent. I don't know. How do you guys keep finding a way for people to root for this guy, the both of them?
I think that's really a question for Sera. I think we just keep doing our job and understanding what we can, to be honest. I think it's a credit to the device. It really keeps working.
I mean, I don't feel a huge need to make you root for him or her all of the time, but I think, honestly, we just cast this really, really well when we hired these 2, because I feel like you can stay on board with really extreme situations that you're watching on a TV show if you truly understand like where this human is coming from. And so a lot of the work is to, hand them something that makes sense, and then give them the space to behave like humans and work their way through these crazy situations. And like the rule on the show is that the plot can be batshit crazy, like insane stuff that would hopefully never happen in real life. But the emotional inner life of the characters and their relationship should be very grounded. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what anchors the show. And just to speak to the thing Penn was saying about all of these times when he shows up on set and technically has like 2 lines all day, but he has 10 chunks of inner monologue. So it's going to feel to the audience, you know, there's a sort of unnatural rhythm to that. Like actors on set have to pause for a lot longer than you would in life in a conversation, because like the first AD or Penn stand-in are reading his lines. So we have the timing, right? But the unexpected gift of that I certainly found when I was in post working on cutting these episodes together is there's Victoria just being and behaving and like living in Love's body for like a really fucking long time because Joe's head won't shut up. And so therefore we got such a beautiful, you know, like I feel like it makes me love the characters more. I have the same mixed feelings about the characters that everybody does, but when I just watch her like really for a nice long time kind of say something vulnerable and wait for her husband to say something, and it can take a really long time because he's thinking a lot before he speaks, I think it allows us to just see our characters be in the situation more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Victoria, how was that for you as a scene partner to have to deal with that, you know, Sera, as you put it, sort of unnatural rhythm? I mean, and your character is especially intense this season, especially when she discovers some secrets around the neighborhood, which again, no spoilers, but sort of tell us about how you are approaching that.
Well, you know, we've been doing that since last season. I feel like I worked in a lot of very like, I studied theater, so we did like the craziest, most absurd things you had to justify and make real. So the idea that I just need to like keep living while somebody else is like having an internal monologue, it's just like, okay, like I just have to keep staying invested and keep connecting with whatever he's giving me, which may not be related to what Danny is saying, like his stand-in. Like, so I think that it's like quite simple actually. But I do love what you said about it adding to the tension. It certainly does. I mean, there's some moments, I love the moments where she finally is like, you do this thing where you just don't talk. You know, so we're not pretending like it's not happening. Like it is, he really is a daydreamer.
No, he's a daydreamer.
I mean, I feel like that's how she interprets it. He's just he's thinking, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah. Also, I even as Love got a little prickled when you said Joe Goldberg instead of Quinn-Goldberg, because I was like, we both hyphenated our names. He's a feminist, okay?
My apologies, Joe Quinn-Goldberg. And you know, Penn, this season we really see Joe Quinn-Goldberg acclimating to this new role as a loving father, right, to his new son, and he really wants to be the best dad he can be while he's grappling with his own past and his own childhood, which we see a lot more of this season. And you know, we through his internal monologue, we realize that he's really struggling to sort of beat back the things that have made him who he is. You know, you've said publicly before that there's not a lot that you enjoy about Joe. This season, did that change at all? Do you like him a little better now?
I think certain things I say are magnified more than others. While it's true that Joe, like, you know, I get a lot out of this role, and there's a lot of joy to be had in the experience, you know, growing as an actor. But then it's like, you know, when I'm asked about the sort of like moral arc or an emotional landscape of his mind, that's, you know, I find that it does take its toll when I'm inhabiting it day by day, just even in a bodily way. It's like, you know, it kind of makes my back hurt after a while, my neck ache and stuff. So that I think, you know, that's really. And then I also want to like make clear to people who are like, I don't know about it. It's like, well, no, I mean, he's a murderer. Let's just like, you know, that's fine. It's like, so yeah, the things I've said have definitely been magnified. I don't even remember your question. I just think I had to provide that clarification.
Oh, sure. No, I was just wondering if you like him any better. I know the thing that has been magnified, I think, is that you had once said that you did not particularly enjoy Joe. I think you had a very strong, I don't know if it was a physical reaction as well to Joe. I mean, obviously your posture and everything.
Yeah. Like him, like, do I like him? Like when I think about him, no, but you know, you can also love people without liking them. You can struggle with somebody while ultimately accepting them. And I think I always find, particularly towards the end of every season, I always find this very surprising and gratifying kind of like a deep relationship to what he is grappling with. I mean, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't ultimately be able to like play him well. As much as that, you know, before and after action and cut, I can say whatever I want and think whatever I want, but when I'm playing him, I have to stop all of that. So when I'm playing him, actually, there's often a very deep spiritual experience. So in that sense, I've actually genuinely like learned so much in the role. So, but like, am I going to go on record and say like I like Joe? Like do I like Joe and do I like him more? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say no, because Joe is, you know, he's not to be liked.
This next question comes from our festival sponsor, Citi. The series expertly brings to light red flags that we as humans might often ignore in real life. Was that a conscious approach in the storytelling, Sera?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we're exploring a lot of different things on the show, but I think a huge component of the story with Joe is always about the fact that he's surrounded sometimes by people who are smart and have an instinct, frequently including love, but tell themselves not to listen to that instinct for exactly the reasons that are like the headline of the show, that Joe on paper seems so trustworthy. He sounds so great. He talks such a great game. We have all been trained by this culture that like, what could be more trustworthy? What could be, you know, like doubt yourself. Don't doubt the Joe Goldberg in the room. So that's really one of the great joys of writing this show. I mean, I get to explore like all of the ways that I have been creeped out in my life, you know, all of the things that I like, the inner monologue in my head where I wonder what people are capable of, all the ways that, you know, I sometimes have strange feelings about people and I do ignore them just to be polite. I think that's something we all do. I think it's something women especially do. So yeah, it's something I think we all explore a lot on the show.
Let's talk a little bit about the Netflix of it all too. I mean, obviously the last time I talked to you, Sera and Penn about this, you know, it was this really interesting shift in viewer reaction to the show when it became a Netflix original. You know, the first season of the show, for anyone who isn't familiar, was on Lifetime, but it didn't really blow up until it started streaming on Netflix. And then the subsequent seasons became a Netflix original. You know, did you guys expect that we would be here for season 3 and just sort of looking back at the trajectory of this show and where it's gone?
Did you, Penn?
No.
I have this sort of blanket policy that I always assume everything is going to be canceled because I don't want to save anything. If there's a good idea, I want to do it right now because you really might get canceled at any moment. So there's no saving the good thing for Victoria to do later. We're putting it in this episode since this is when we had the idea, right? On the other hand, I definitely did not know what this season was going to be about when we were making season 1. So the part of me that is always looking for something to completely stress out about was like, oh God, what if there's a season 3 and we have to figure out what that is? So I did project it into the future, but only in terms of worrying.
Tell me a little bit about the genesis of season 3. When did you kind of know that this is where it was going? It is very much so sort of a marriage of equals when you're looking at Joe and Love and the various impulses they each have.
This was always the intention with this relationship, is that you would have a season that for a time felt like, oh, this is the sort of relationship that he has with a woman coming off of the tragedy of his relationship with Beck. And then we have the big twist at the end. And then it's like, okay, this is where it really gets fun, is when they stay together after they really know who the other is. I mean, really more Joe. I think Love had his number pretty early, actually.
Going back to the setting too. I mean, you had a lot of fun last season and the season before that when you talk about sort of the sort of stereotypes and the caricatures you see in the various cities that we're in. Why Silicon Valley? We always are looking for subcultures that are very privileged and a bit insular and living in a bit of a bubble. And I think that's a fair thing to say about the level of just wealth and privilege in those communities. And then within that, we want to create characters that you like, the dark part of you, like when you're drinking your wine or smoking your joint and eating your popcorn and watching this show, and you kind of just want to be like, kill them. You wanted to put them in a neighborhood where it's like, oh, that person's going to die and it'll be really fun to watch. I mean, I'm being a little glib, but honestly, that's part of it, is like, we have to create some assholes here. Right. And, Victoria, your character interacts with a lot of these assholes on this season, especially going from being an LA Quinn to a little bit of a fish out of water and trying to find her bearings socially. So tell me a little bit about the adjustment there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the season starts off where we ended. She's like exploring being a new mom. I think she probably thought it was going to give her some sense of purpose or something. But it's extremely challenging. And then on top of it, she ends up in this environment where she doesn't understand the culture and how to function. Or she does, because she like kind of comes from something quite similar, but in LA, she kind of, we see her in this gorgeous house, but she kind of plays it off as if she's, not extremely wealthy and like completely lives the way she does in part from her family and their wealth. But now it feels like she's in a space where she actually does need to, is supposed to trying to be substantial and like bake the chicken. It really is about the sparkles and the money and the brands and the really what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. Conforming? Yeah, conforming. Yeah. And when you're, you inhabit, it seems like a bigger ensemble this season than last season and even the previous season. It just sort of feels like that world expands a little more with each season. And I also imagine when you're all together crafting a show about essentially a pair of murderers trying to be their best selves, it's a little tricky to strike the right balance. How do you sort of approach it so it's not too campy or overly serious? Like how do you strike that balance, Sera, when you're writing it and Penn and Victoria when you're bringing that to life?
I think the thing we were talking about with grounding the emotion is what keeps it from being campy. And also, a million decisions made by a million people on crew, the writer, the director, like every choice of like, what shirt is Joe going to wear is a choice to move us towards or away from camp. Every lighting choice is about that too. So we have chosen a template to put this in that looks a lot more like a more serious romantic sweeping story, and at times a more serious thriller. But I think also we keep in mind always why we're telling the story to begin with. And the show is meant to be super fun and entertaining. And if you just want to watch it because you want to watch people do some super crazy stuff, that's cool, right? But we also have stuff where we're interested in expressing through these really extreme characters. And I think that stuff keeps us honest. the example I'd give of like really a North Star this season for all of the writers and directors was about the impossibility of being a good parent. And then specifically how our culture is like ridiculously awful to mothers. Like we seem to take a perverse pleasure. You know, since season 1, we've been talking about like the system is rigged, girls can't win, like don't go on social media, we'll judge you. Go on social media, we'll judge you. But we seem as a culture to take just this vicious, vulturish delight in watching women try to parent and then saying, you're not a good mother. And so we didn't want to make things we don't want to unground something and then miss the opportunity to tell that story through love. You know, there's some serious moments throughout the season for Joe and Love, both that are just about how am I going to do this right? And I feel really terrible that I'm being judged.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate to that personally very much as a mother of 2 young ones. Yeah. It's a really interesting way of grappling with it. And again, I wish more people would have seen this season before being able to talk about it, so I don't give away any spoilers. But yeah, there are some really fun juxtapositions of when they're going through some of the more intense, violent things that are happening versus still trying to be like, hey, is the baby okay in all of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's another show that somebody can make I don't really know what it's about because nobody ever gets killed, but that's about a man who has a baby and he had a really terrible childhood that was full of trauma and hardship. And now he's really stressing out because he doesn't want to raise his son the way that he was raised. And I think there's similarly, you know, about a mother, you know, whose mom is in the picture. Dottie is in the picture, giving constructive criticism to Love like frequently about her parenting. And it's just like, maybe there's a story that doesn't go all the way to the extreme of like, to protect her child, she will literally do anything. But the heart of that is very real for, I think, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not a parent myself, but pretty much every parent I've ever talked to has struggled with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I went into the show going like, yeah, let's watch some crazy, gory, fun stuff and being like, oh, this is really speaking to me on a different level as a parent. But yeah, so I also wanted to ask, again, without giving too much away, Penn and Victoria, what were some of your favorite scenes to shoot this season? And what can we expect to see from the Goldberg family?
Our favorite scenes are the ones we can't give away.
Ah, well.
I mean, well, anyway, yes, it is very hard to talk about some of this stuff without spoiling. The scenes in therapy, which was some of the stuff we shot first up, but it was block shot, so, you know, it's not just in one episode. That's what's coming to mind. I think the second episode in particular stands out to me because of some of what you two were just sharing about the universal fears of parenthood, and then of just being, you know, in a relationship, in marriage, particularly where you're like talking about what it takes to raise children and needing to like make the integrity of your relationship a foundation for the rest of the household members, like the pressure that exists there. I mean, I think you really start to get into that in episode 2. And that was but then, you know, that stuff continues throughout the whole thing. And so for me, I think maybe it was like the scenes where Joe and Love are like really talking to one another, which you get all throughout without giving anything away. Even just sitting down, you know, just sitting down and talking to each other. Those tend to be among my favorite. There's also the crazy stuff where I don't say anything and I'm like holding some kind of weapon and doing crazy things, and I'm barefoot and wet and I'm hanging from a whatever, or, you know, there's just like, there's stuff like that I get to do. It's fun. Yeah, I don't know about you, Victoria.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard to talk about without giving spoilers.
So hard, yeah.
Some much crazy shit happens in this show, you know, every turn. There was this one great moment where I was supposed to be hiding something really quickly, but we were also getting these like beautiful beams of light from the sky through some trees and like maybe like a little lens flare or something. That was fun, you know, where it's just like a time of day thing, you know, and it's like, this is just what I was saying before, the magic of just these uncontrollable things coming together. Yeah, but I feel like anything else I would say would be spoiler.
Victoria, can I ask with that? You don't have to say anything about it. Do you have a favorite episode at this point?
Oh, I'm not really sure. Would have to look again. I don't even feel like I think of them as episodes.
Yeah, right.
Because we shoot. I would have to review what's in which episodes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What about you, Penn?
Like I was saying, I think like 2 and 8.
8. I most recently watched 8. Yeah.
That one is the craziest, I think, episode of the season.
Yeah.
I guess in a certain way the finale is, but like episode 8, I'm very excited for people to see. We can't say a damn thing about it.
Yeah. I mean, our show from episode 8 to 10 is always like, it's that regardless of what time you're watching them, it's that thing where like, okay, I guess I have to keep going because it's just they're just so intense. You don't understand how it could get more intense, and then it does.
Yeah.
Can I call out a couple things there? Because I produce the show, so I'm allowed to walk really close up to the edge of spoilers and shout out their performances a little bit, and they're also being humble. Like, so some of my favorite work from Penn this season is him acting opposite a baby. And the thing people should know is that is crazy. Like, the baby is a human being who cries frequently. There's usually more than one. They get switched out. There's also various baby dolls that are not alive that he's acting opposite. And it's the most beautiful, vulnerable, specific work. And it's seamless. And I don't know. I could sing your praises all day, Penn. And then for Victoria, you guys will know it when you see it. There's an episode where she is quite drunk in a bathtub. And
I
does
wanted to mention those.
incredible work. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you who else is in that location. I will say she uses an ungodly amount of bubble bath.
Bubble choreography. I don't think it's going to be a thing.
Right. I know the scene you're talking about, and soon everyone else will too. But yeah, okay.
That means we have an iconic bathtub scene in every season.
Yep.
Is that true? Yeah, it is. Definitely.
Was that deliberate, Sera?
No, I do spend a lot of time in bathtubs. I'll know I've made it when someone sends me a cool one. No, I don't know. I don't know why we're always in bathtubs, I don't know. I can't like overstate how much I love those scenes. You know what I'm talking about, Elaine. Is this torture for people?
It was
It's very hard to have this conversation before people have seen the show, but there is so much good, fun, crazy, batshit stuff happening this season. Thank you so much, Victoria and Penn and Sera. It was wonderful chatting with you guys today. And thank you everybody else for joining us for this special PaleyFest New York conversation with the cast and creatives behind season 3 of You. And thank you again to PaleyFest official card and sponsor Citi. You can enjoy more of these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. Thank you all and take care.